I fell into it. I had to learn how to be an entrepreneur after I had a company that was growing rapidly, and not because that's what I set out to do.
Wunderbar.
Wonderful.
Korrekt. Komisch.
Funny.
Korrekt. Kreuzschlitzschraubenzieher.
Screwdriver.
Korrekt.
Some people build businesses for wealth. Other people build businesses for flexibility. But there's just a few that build businesses because once were its customers. Don't believe it's possible?
I'm traveling to Berlin to talk to the family-focused entrepreneur Chacon about everything from drinking wine, time difference, and setting up an office during a pandemic. We take a look how this regular dad and software developer from San Francisco ended up in Germany as the founder of the viral company Chatterbug, the language learning platform in Github, the software which was recently acquired by Microsoft for an impressive $7.5 billion.
And guess what? It all started with developer Scott needing the place to build the software and expat Scott needing to learn a language. Hi Scott, thank you so much for meeting us, and we're here at Chatterbug office in Berlin. Mm-hmm. It's great. I mean, it's amazing. We came in, we saw the studios downstairs, the office here. How long have you been in the office?
That's a good question. We've been here for about 2 years, I think. We moved in right after shutdown. So we had, it was actually kind of nice. We got to set up stuff without people trying to be around, and we're like, great. And then, nobody actually, I mean, as you can see, we only have a handful of people in the office at a time, which is kind of too bad. I miss having people in person all the time.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think the pandemic has brought us now to a point where we actually need to meet people in person. I see that, especially live events are coming back.
Yeah.
A friend of mine is organizing a lot of live events, and he said to me that they're just booming right now. It's like the need of people to meeting again.
Yeah, we actually, it's funny because I'm from, my previous company was Github, and we had a ton of remote work. That was like a big thing for us. We had at least half the company. Some departments were 75% remote. And we felt like we were making it up. Like there weren't a lot of super remote companies at the time. And so I learned a lot of things of kind of how to run a remote company. And then I came out of there and we were like, do we really want to do a fully remote company? Because there are all these downsides that every company in the world is seeing now, right? Of how difficult it is for everybody to be home all the time and never see anybody. And I know how to mitigate that. Like we ran into, figuring out how to get people in person sometimes, or how to, form little communities or talk about personal things when you're in have some forum for it, like coffee time, over Slack or something like that. But man, it's hard to do for years. I feel like our company was better prepared because of our experience at GitHub, but it's still very hard.
It is, yeah. And I think kind of it pisses me off, this or mentality sometimes, remote, this is the remote or in office. And I think the truth sometimes is in the middle. I think it's like an hybrid approach. I think it's...
Yeah, we tried to go, for Chatterbug, what we wanted to do was do a hybrid approach or like a hub model. So we wanted most people to be as close to Berlin as possible. So if we do want to, have a dinner or whatever, that everybody can do that, or an all hands meeting. And we've encouraged people to work from home if they want to, if they feel like they could be more productive, or if they're not feeling well or whatever. And so a lot of the company knows how to work from home, but not everybody has the greatest setups, or people are in Wohngemeinschaft, like a group of people that all live together, right? And all their roommates are all together, and it can be distracting and things like that. So I think we were kind of set up for it, and everybody, just worked from home all the time instead of one day a week. But yeah, again, we can do some stuff in person, but it's so nice when you can be around people in person for once, right?
Yeah, I strongly agree with that. Going back to GitHub, I was reading about an interview, and you consider yourself like an accidental entrepreneur. And I was very interested in your journey as an entrepreneur, starting with GitHub and Chatterbug. And why do you consider yourself an accidental entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, I think I should probably go back and watch the original talk that I gave, but I guess it's because I didn't grow up wanting to be an entrepreneur. Actually, my dad is a small entrepreneur, right? He had his small business that I worked in. It was my first job when I was a kid, and it wasn't really this thing that I wanted, like to run my own business and to have my own thing. I wanted to do interesting things. I wanted to learn interesting things, but like running my own business and and being a boss and, I don't know, raising money or being rich or like this wasn't what I wanted as a kid. And so I kind of stumbled into it because I fell in love with programming and I found that I really, really enjoyed doing that. And I went to school, actually. I did a computer science course, and I felt like half the people that were there because their parents said, do computer science, right? Like, this is going to be, you'll make a lot of money, it'll be great. And I just liked doing it. Like, I just enjoy, to this day, I really enjoy programming. Yeah, I mean, I think I just found myself in the right community of people that love doing that. And we started a project that was interesting to us and we never thought it was going to be a big company, right? And then it ended up being this huge, huge company. And so, and we kind of constantly found ourselves catching up to what are we supposed to do in this circumstance, because none of us thought that that's where it would be. And yeah, I mean, that's I think why I think of myself as an accidental entrepreneur, because I fell into it. I had to learn how to be an entrepreneur after I had a company that was growing rapidly, and not because that's what I set out to do.
And in a way, Chatterbug was similar as well, because I was reading your story on you moving into Paris and, trying to learn French and realizing, it's not that easy and the apps out there are not that great. Is that how you end up, deciding to start this company?
Yeah. So I lived in Paris for about a year with my family, and we all tried to learn French in different ways. My wife at the time went to in-person classes at Alliance Française. I was working, so I did like italki and did like a lot of online tutoring. And my daughter went to school in a bilingual school where they spoke French half the time. And so, and we all struggled in different ways. And so I kind of had this both passion for, this seems like a solvable problem. It seems like something, everybody learns languages, like how there must be a better way of doing this, and started building my own tools and experimenting with how can you solve all of the problems that are around language learning, especially for adults, and make a new language accessible for people, which I think I still struggle with, right? I've been working on this for 6 years, and I think we have tools that are great, and if I wanted to learn another language, I would 100% want to use my own product to do it. I'm still learning German after after 5 years of this, but yeah, it came from, this is a problem that seems poorly served in the world, and I want to see it be better, right? And that's always what's interesting to me about business problems, about people trying to solve things through creating a new business or starting a new startup, is not do they want to be successful, but like, what is the problem that they really want to solve in the world? And hopefully it's a problem that they have and they're trying to solve for themselves. I find those the most interesting startups and the most interesting entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and talking about success, I do find that sometimes what the definition of success in an early stage of life then is something, and then it changes, with time. And to me, for instance, was when I started in e-commerce, especially, I just want to make money. I really love, growing and, launching ads, and you seeing that 4 ROAS and 5 ROAS. It almost became like a game. Obviously, how much money I can spend in marketing and how much return I can get. And then as I grew up, I realized that wasn't making me happy at all. I was making money, but that's not what I was really passionate about. And I realized that what I was passionate about was actually helping people to achieve something. And I realized this because one of our brands was a supplement company, and that was my favorite brand out of all of them, because I was getting customers saying, hey, my life improved. And this is the reason why we started, our e-commerce platform, because more than anything, we want to help other people to build successful businesses. So what meant success to you, and did it change through time?
Yeah, I mean, now I think I had the opposite problem, where I started a passion company and it turned into a huge business. And we had a really large, massive exit. It's a fantastic, story, right? And that was essentially my first company. And then started this next company and had to learn how to create a business, right? Where we didn't really learn how to grow a business, how to look at, funnel analysis, or like learn growth strategies or do marketing. We essentially never did any marketing. Like, it was very viral from the beginning. And it was all kind of accidental. And so when I started another company and I was like, well, this isn't that hard, right? Like I'll start a product that I really love and really works and helps people. And it's been from day one really difficult to find the right audience, right? And that's what every other company I think runs into. And I think it's been really fascinating for me to go through this again and learn what it is to grow a company, right? Like to actually struggle and figure out how do we get super fans, how do we get people to find out about this, to find out that this solves a problem that they have. It's a difficult story to tell for most companies, I think. And so, yeah, the last 5 or 6 years has been me learning how to build a company after having a successful company. But I think in the end, success for me is the same, right? Like the exit happened after I left GitHub, and I left GitHub to start this company. What's always for me defines success is, are people using your product, right? And do people love your product? Because I like building stuff that makes people's lives better, and that's always what's interesting to me. And for us at Chatterbug, like we look at how many people go and get certifications or tell us that it really helped them pass a test and get a job or move to another country or feel comfortable where they live, and that type of thing to me is what drives me and what's interesting, right? Because I know that I'm changing people's lives. Like it helps them do something they weren't able to do before. Or in a way that was easier or more accessible than what they otherwise would have had access to. And at GitHub, it was the same thing, right? Like it was collaborating with people on software was, I think, really, really difficult. And we really, I think, changed the industry in a lot of ways to help people work together better on software. And I see it all the time, and I still use GitHub, and it still is nice to me, right? Like I love that I use my products all the time and they make my life better and hopefully a lot of other people too. And I find that really engaging.
Yeah, and I do share your vision because I think focus on your products and money will come. And I see a lot of people out there trying to kind of teach other entrepreneurs or inspire other entrepreneurs, I think in the wrong way, which is how you make your first million, how you make the second million, how you go from 0 to 100 million. And to me, that's not the point. At the end of the day, money is something that, once you achieve that, it's a goal that once the goal is achieved, then what's next? And I think you have to find goal that can never be achieved. Like the big why is a goal that can never be achieved because that's going to keep you driving forward and motivate you. So find what you love and money will come. And I think it's very important to talk about this, especially for someone like you that, started a company like GitHub and then was an exit of, I think, 8 billion with Microsoft. So it was like a huge success story, right? Yeah. So it's amazing to hear this. And I think it's a great inspiration for everyone out there just not to focus on the revenue too much. I mean, of course, you have to be profitable. I think you need the money to operate the company, but that's not the end goal. It's just, I don't know, it's like putting petrol in a car, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting actually to me to see from the GitHub exit what various people in the company that I worked with did after that, right? Some still working at GitHub, just loved the product, and even after the acquisition, like if anything, put fuel into what GitHub can do and who it can reach. Some people essentially stopped working. Some people started new companies, right? Like rolled that out and took stuff that we were working on in GitHub and made new products out of them and want to really focus on that. And it's always interesting to me when you don't, I guess, need to earn money anymore, what you do, right? Like I feel like that's very telling of what you really enjoyed or what you really liked. And I'm here 6 years later, still grinding away, working every day, doing all of the same things that I was doing before because you're right. I love doing this. Like I love building stuff. It doesn't really, you have an exit, but that's not the end of the story, right? Like you always want to have something to do that yes. is interesting and driving.
Yeah, someone told me you become a billionaire when you change a billion people's life, not when you make a billion, right? So I think it's a good way sometimes to be. Like at the end of the day, making a product that can change people's life, and if you can change people's life, meaning that your product has touched them in a way and improved their life in a way that eventually they're gonna love it, and that's what product market fit at the end of the day is, right?
Yeah.
And you traveled a lot. I think you are an American living in Berlin, lived in Paris. How did you end up here?
Yeah, so I mean, I started this language learning company because of my time in Paris, and I spent time in Paris because I had never lived anywhere other than California until I was 35. So like I really didn't travel. I mean, I traveled a lot. I talked at conferences. I did a lot of evangelism for Git and GitHub. And
Did you have a passport? Because I know lots
oh
of
yeah,
Americans
no,
didn't.
I filled up a passport and needed a new one before it expired when I was in my Git after I started working at GitHub because I traveled and I talked at conferences everywhere. Okay. Which was awesome, but I didn't live anywhere else, and I didn't really speak any other languages, and that's kind of what led me down this journey, right? I wanted to have a new skill set. I wanted to have a new experience of what is it like to not be a Californian, and so I moved to Paris for the year, and I really loved it. Like I loved that it was different. I loved that it was interesting. I loved that I needed to learn a new language. And I even kind of enjoyed the struggle, right, of not speaking the language of the place that I lived. It's frustrating and maddening sometimes, and it's delightful when something works, right, and you realize that you've grown and you've gotten better at something. And so when we started Chatterbug, and I really wanted to try to have this nice language learning tool, we started with a language that I didn't speak at all, was the first curriculum that we did so that I could try my own product, right? So I started learning German as we were developing the curriculum, sort of like lesson by lesson. I was going online and doing it with our tutors, and working through the curriculum and making sure that it works, that you can learn a language this way, that you can get conversational this way. Because I spoke some Spanish and I spoke some French, we started with German, just as kind of the next, relatively popular language. And I knew some people in Berlin, some from my travels around when I was speaking at conferences. And I knew a lot of expats who lived in Berlin, never learned how to speak German very well. And so I thought, oh, maybe there's a market here. And so we opened up an office here. And then it was so much easier to grow a company here than in San Francisco for what we were trying to do. Something focused on languages. Things aren't as expensive as in San Francisco. You can find a lot of expats, language teachers, language learners, and so we ended up focusing on Berlin and growing in Berlin. And over time, I spent more and more time here, and then kept an apartment here, and then eventually moved here full time. Now I married a German woman, and we have a kid, and so this is my home now, which is a far cry from 6 years ago when I started the company.
Do you find it hard to manage because you still have family as well in San Francisco? So do you find hard to manage that? Because I'm in a similar position as well with my daughter. I separated with my ex-wife, and now I'm married again, and now we're moving. So it's like it's always from Ireland to Berlin and to Kyiv, which is the other place that we go often. So it's hard for me, sometimes, and I found a way to manage it in a way, and I was wondering how you are.
Yeah, no, it's super difficult. I think, anytime that a family's split up, it's really, really hard. I was going back, actually, at some point I was going back and forth every 2 weeks. I was flying to California and to Berlin, and then COVID made that much more difficult, and so now we're trying to work on having the kids come out here and go back, but that's also difficult on them. It's always very hard. And even time zones. I mean, this is the same for business as for this as well, of just time zones make things really hard, right? Like anytime you want to have a call with somebody or something and have it be morning there and evening here and figure out how to set that up, it's always a pain. I'm lucky in that, because of the GitHub exit, it's not a problem monetarily for me to go back and forth, which for a lot of families it is. But now I have a baby here too, so it's either I bring the baby back and forth or bring my kids back and forth, and it's hard on everybody. And it's really unfortunate, but sometimes life changes and you're much happier, and it's the decision that you have to make.
Yeah, regarding time zone, it's actually funny. When we started Viceroy Group with my business partner Corey, and then Pop-Up, he was living in Vancouver. He recently actually moved to Dubai, so he was working European times. So he was waking up at midnight.
Yeah,
waking up at midnight and working until 3 p.m. and then going to sleep at 5 p.m. And he did this for 7 months.
Yeah, that's a long time. I went. We had a sort of big change at Chatterbug where we were trying to change our shift our focus really rapidly, and it happened right around Thanksgiving time, and I had a vacation planned in Hawaii with my family, and so we were all in Hawaii in this real beautiful place with my whole family, and it was great. Except I was like, I need to work while I'm here. Like I have to focus on the company and get this stuff done. And so time zone wise, it ended up being I'd wake up at like 3 a.m. because Berlin time is almost 12 hours difference, right? So I'd wake up at like 3 a.m. in Hawaii, and I'd work until like I'd work it until 11 a.m. or something, and everybody else is starting to get up, and then I'd be like, okay, I got all that work done, and then go immediately into having fun with people in Hawaii, and then sleep 3 hours, right? And
That's crazy.
It's like, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that for
crazy.
7 months. But yeah, it's every time I'm in the States, it's like that, just time shifting everything to try to overlap with people here as much as possible. But it's a huge pain. It's a huge pain. But I mean, we had it at Github where we would have, we ended up being a medium-sized company, relatively large company, I guess. Running these services where we had customers all over the world, and so we had ops people that were almost evenly distributed around the world, and there was no good time for everybody to meet. There was no good time to have an all-hands meeting, right, for the company. And we tried shifting things around and trying different things, and we ended up just kind of picking a time and doing it and recording it and then letting people watch it later if they want to, or distributing summaries of it if people wanted to skim and say, okay, here's the important stuff, right? Because it became a huge pain. Our ops team actually, I believe at some point they were having shifting rotating meetings. So every week they would shift the time of the meeting 4 hours so that like once a month it was bad for everybody, but it wasn't bad for everybody all the time, right? So yeah, it's one of the things that technology can't fix is the sun. It's really difficult
100%.
to change that somehow.
No.
So yeah.
Yeah, and your travels brought you very far away as well, because I was reading about your story in Africa and spending time in Africa. And it's interesting because Corey, my business partner, he actually lived in Africa for 4 years in Uganda. He was running a company over there. What was your experience in Africa? Can you tell me more about that?
I mean, it was interesting. It was unique, I suppose. It's a much longer story, probably. I'll try to keep it really short. But I got into politics, a little, like local congressional race in California, where I was living when I was a kid, when I was 22 or 23. And I actually ran for Congress because nobody else was running, and I was like, I'm going to write some software, and 23-year-old. And I met a woman who was running for Congress, who ended up running for the same seat, and I dropped out and I helped her. And she was writing a book on post-genocide Rwanda in Africa, and invited us to come with her for the next trip that she was going. And she was interviewing people. She was interviewing the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, and was interviewing ministers in the government. And so we were able to come, and I helped film some of it and took notes and like kind of helped her out. We were friends from the congressional race. And so my experience, I think, was a little bit different, I think, than probably most people who travel to Africa, especially from California, where it was, high-level meetings with government officials and the Rwandan government and stuff, and I was kind of a fly on the wall, but it was fascinating. It was fascinating. But I mean, it was fascinating, I think, in the way that going to any culture that's not exactly the same as your own is and seeing, how that government works, how especially Rwanda, right? Like, I mean, the 94 genocide, I mean, we were there 10 years later, right? And so it was real reconstruction and still, and it was fascinating to me at the time. But, I've been back once or twice since that, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful. But it's not, my home, right?
Yeah. They're actually doing great. Corey was telling me that there is a big difference, for instance, Uganda versus Rwanda, because the genocide has basically killed all the old generation. So the young people now, they basically start thriving. And he was noticing a big difference between the two countries, where Rwanda was much more developed in terms of like broadband and Wi-Fi and roads and entrepreneurship as well in general, and companies starting out.
Yeah, I mean, Rwanda's always, it's super, super fascinating to me.
Yeah.
As a country, both a post-genocide story, reconstruction, rebuilding, like how they approached stuff, how they approached justice, right? The justice system. There was a huge number of people who had committed murder, right? Like, how do you deal with that as a society? How do you reintegrate people? How do you start life over again? Like, what's justice and reconciliation look like in a culture like that? And we were able actually to go to one of the Gacaca trials, which is like this South Africa had a similar thing post-apartheid, where you would have like a community organization where you would do essentially a murder trial of look at the person in the face, tell them what happened, like tell them the truth, like it's about getting truth out, and it was completely fascinating. But just how does a society deal with something so horrendous, right? In a way that doesn't focus on just punishing everybody, because that you can't get back to a functioning society that way. And when you're dealing with something like that as a society, what is that? What are the options available, right? Correct. And there's not a lot of societies that have had to go through that, so there's not a lot of places to learn from. So yeah, it's very interesting.
I find that as entrepreneurs, especially when you are traveling a lot and when you have to deal with like especially family and business, it's very hard to establish routines. And I was wondering if you have any advice, or if you have any routine that you kept you in balance, or kept you more productive, or helped you with your mental health, or things like that.
That is a good question. Actually, I probably should have a better answer for this. I feel like I have very few routines, actually. Every time that I try to have a routine, I feel like you're saying, I travel or I do something and it breaks it up. And the other thing that makes this really difficult, as you probably understand, is having kids, right? Like, kids make, they force you.
Cheers to that.
Oh, cheers.
Cheers to that. Yeah, having kids.
Actually, I've been living in Germany so long that you have to look people in the eye when you.
Oh yeah, but in Italy too as well.
Yeah, it's very important. I got yelled at that so many times that now I'm really hyper aware of it. And then I go to America and everybody looks at the glass when they do it, and I'm like no.
9.
Yeah, stop it immediately.
Das ist verboten.
Kids enforce routines sometimes because they have their own routines and you have to kind of follow those, right? So with my daughter now, she sleeps 2 or 3 times a day, and they have very specific times. And so on the weekends, I know I put her down, I have about an hour, I can get some stuff done. I try to figure out what that's going to be, do that. She wakes up and it's, time with her, right? And so now I think my daughter really provides the structure of the day for the most part, because, she has less that she can kind of get off of that without getting really angry. What I try to do is write down at the beginning of the day what I want to accomplish that day, right? Like I have actually, one of the things that's taken me forever is figuring out a way of keeping notes in a way that doesn't explode and get impossible to deal with. And I've been using an app called Bear, which the thing is I have to have it on my desktop and I have to have it on my iPhone, and I need them to be able to sync. And for some reason, that's very, very difficult to do. And I wanted to be in Markdown. And so I finally found something, but I try to keep this to-do list, and I work off of this to-do list. That's like 90% of my day. So every time I have an idea, or there's something I need to do, or I know I need to get it done, I go into my OneNote and I put in a thing, and if I forget it, like I have a place that's there, right? Like it drives me crazy to be out on the street or whatever and be like talking to my wife and say, hey, remember, to do this thing, or I'll be like, hey, remind me to do this thing, and you always forget it. And so having this system, I think, has really helped focus me, right? Where as soon as I put it down there, now it will never be forgotten, right? Yeah. Like I can deprioritize it, or I can push it down the list, or I can put it into like a separate thing, which is sometimes really good, right, of prioritization. But I have this thing, and so then at the beginning of the day, I'll go in that list and be like, okay, here's the 3 things I want to do today. And whenever I can find time to do them, that's when I do them. And it's really difficult. Like, I don't know, it depends on what you're doing for a living, but there's different things that I do that I need different headspaces for. And so you need to find a time where it's like, okay, I need to code, so I need to have a thing where I can get in the zone and kind of focus on that and do that and not have disruptions. And then there's times when I need to be more creative and talk to people and be around people. And so, yeah, fitting that into your day, I think, is the challenge, right? But like having a starting point, having a to-do list, having a thing where it's like, okay, I can focus on these things, and I know if I do these things, then it's a good day. Then it's not always a mess of I have 100 things I could do. Like, what's the important thing, right?
And I love it because it's so simple, and I see a lot around, especially on social media, there is like the CEO mindset, the millionaire mindset, and the CEO routines, and things that you have to do to be successful. I saw a video the other day, like Forbes grind set video, where it's like I wake up at 4 a.m., I do my meditation, and then and I laugh at them because it's like, yes, maybe, but for instance, as you said, you have kids, that's it, that goes off the window.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe if you are like a single guy that's, on your early 20s and you have no relationships and things like that you can do it, like no problem. But does it mean is that a recipe for success? I look at you and say, well, obviously not.
Yeah,
I look at me and I say, obviously not, because I'm the same. I think the only thing that I try to do is eat healthy, because I had to, my routines are all over the place because of the kids, because of the traveling. But one thing that I try to keep, whatever I do, is like try to have a balanced diet.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my wife and I go in waves, right? Where we look at what is something that we're not feeling good about in our lives right now, or what's something that's about, like, are we starting to gain weight, or are we drinking too much, or whatever, and then we'll kind of set a challenge for ourselves and do that together. And it's for us, for me, it's easier to do that with somebody. Like she wanted to go on a diet, and so she said, hey, I want to do this diet, and I'll be like, okay, I'll be your personal chef, and I'll cook those meals so that you, like, I mean, we're both eating the same thing, but like having a partner, right, and setting a goal and then getting there together, I think makes things much easier.
My wife is here, actually. Yeah, she's laughing because we do the same thing. Exactly the same thing. It's like, oh yeah, we gain weight, so now you are a chef. I do the workout plan. You do the chef, and then we'll try to do it. Sometimes we fail, obviously, because but we try.
Yeah, I mean, we decided we were drinking too much over the holidays. And, my wife and I work together, and so we have this thing where we're like, oh, we'll be so much more creative if we have some wine. And then it's another glass of wine, and then we're like, okay, well, now we're too creative. And we're too creative for a month. And so then it's like, okay, well, now try January, right? And I made it to January 27th. And then we had an all hands meeting, and I was like, I owe it to the company to have a drink with the company, right?
Of course,
like,
yeah,
so, but yeah, so, but I mean, I think that's nice. And I mean, it's the same. I mean, we see the same thing motivation-wise for language learning, right? People need to set goals and get to the next goal and visualize what the goal is. I mean, our biggest time as a language learning company is January, because everybody sets their goals for the year, right? They're like, okay, I'm going to learn a language this year. And I find that, I mean, I've been doing this for years, right? Like, what's my next thing I want to accomplish? What's my next goal, right? And break that down into a bunch of little things you can do and start doing them one at a time. And it's so much better than being like, I'm going to, I don't know, eat healthy in general, right? For me, it's always easier to have a goal for that and to get there, and then figure out, okay, what is my next one?
Yeah, it's like a KPI, right? It's like, yeah, of course. It's like, and the KPI is like yes or no.
I mean,
so
it's similar, I guess, to a lot of to business stuff, right? Like, I mean, we do this where okay, I want to do this language learning thing, and I have a vision for what that could be, but really the thing that guides it is the motivation behind it, right? Like, I want to have people be able to learn a new language in as efficiently as possible in the time that they have. And that drives things, right? Like, it doesn't matter what tool it is. We can always re-look at whatever we're building and be like, is this solving the problem that we set out to solve, right? Now that it's in real users' hands and people are using it, like, does it stand up? And is it doing what our goal is? And I think that's actually one of the hardest things. Being an entrepreneur is constantly, like, how often do you look at that, right? Do you look at, is your company doing what it should be doing the best way and fulfilling sort of the vision that it has? Because do you do that every month and then it's kind of all over the place, right? Do you do that once a year, in which case you could have been wasting time, like going in the wrong direction for a year? Like, I find that to be really, even at GitHub, which was doing great, like, we would constantly be, are we going in the right direction, right? Like, do we go wider? Do we have more tools? Do we go narrower? Do we cut out stuff that we have, right? Like, and focus more? Do we allow people to customize it or have it inside the firewall? Whatever, I don't know. But like, there's always different ways that you can go with even a successful product or a non-successful product, trying to make it successful. And I find it fascinating that there's no right answer to that, right? Like everybody, and even within your own company, I think some people think that you're changing course too often, and some people think that you're sticking to the wrong thing for too long, right? And so it's like,
what's the right direction? What's the right answer?
I mean, for me, because it's my company, and I work with my wife as well, and so we have similar conversations. We want to give something long enough to prove itself, and then we take a look at the data and we try to empirically say we're pretty sure like this is working or this is not working. And as soon as we can look at it and say it doesn't feel right or it's not working or the data's not showing it, then it's a gut call, right? Like, what do you want your product to be? And we do that all the time. I mean, this is sort of pivoting, right? Like you look at something, and if it's a big change of where you want to go, then you really have to pivot the whole company, right? Change what you're doing. And if it's hopefully little things like we've spent a lot of different time trying to figure out who's our core audience, like who really gets the most out of Chatterbug, right? And this is another thing that I really didn't learn at GitHub because it was just always taking off, right? We never really had to look at how are people using it. Like we hired a marketing guy once who came in and set up personas, and we never heard of that, right? And I was like, what's a persona? And they're like, well, these are types of people that are using your product. And I was like, but I don't understand what you're trying to solve with this. Like I think it was just because he had done it in a previous company, right? He was like, you make personas.
It's one of the things to trigger,
and I was like, where are we going with this? Like, how does this help us make decisions on stuff, right? And at GitHub, because we were all software engineers, we would always just use the product and be like, okay, well, here's the next thing that I want, right? From time to time, we'd have to look at, we're trying out an experiment, and do we really want to be focusing our resources on that experiment, or do we want to cut it out and focus up and do what's working for us? And it changes per entrepreneur. Like for me, I want a product that makes a big impact and that really helps people, in this case, learn a language. And so it's just every couple months you look at what are you doing, and is this the right direction, and do I think that this is going to help the most people in the best way, right?
It's interesting because when we started Pop-Up, we didn't do the personas, and then we had to do the personas just because when we were kind of attracting investors and things like that, they wanted to hear it. And the reason why we didn't do personas because we are merchants. We started running our own e-commerce stores, and we did absolutely everything. We did drop shipping, we did white labeling, both myself and Corey, and we built Pop-Up for us at the end of the day, right? So for us, it was like, we don't need to do personas. We are the users. Like we do this stuff every day.
Actually, you know what? What's funny is that, and something that I found useful in both. We do some user interviews now where we'll try to get people to call us, right, or to have us call them and talk to them about, how are you using the product? What do you find that you like? What do you find that brings you back? What do you find helpful? And I always find them fascinating. It's always so much better than trying to figure out, craft something to this imaginary person or something. And I realized actually we did that a lot at GitHub as well, just in a way less structured way, where I would go to conferences and I would speak at a conference, and then we'd go to a bar and drink with everybody, at the conference, and everybody would be like, you know what I love about GitHub? You know what I hate about GitHub? Actually, it was mostly, you know what I hate about GitHub. So it was always like, here's the thing, especially if you're drinking with somebody, right? They'll be like, you know what? Here's the thing I don't like about GitHub, right? And they would tell you some feature request or something, and then you'd think about it and be like, you know what? That's a really good point. Like, that's not how I use it, but like I could see coming from that perspective of an agency or of a massive open source developer, project or maintainer, you hit problem sets that we don't hit, right? And you're very important to what we want to build. So, then I go back after that conference or after that night at the bar or whatever, and that's in my head, right? And we can think about, okay, how do we make this better in a way that doesn't dilute the experience for everybody else? But we did it by sponsoring conferences and going and having beers with people, which is really easy for software developers in that context. For language learners, it's a little bit hard, and it's really hard now in sort of the COVID times. But we have done the same thing, right? Like done a drinks hour or whatever, and met people in Berlin that use Chatterbug and come together and say, like, what do you like? What do you not like? What works for you? What did you try before? What did you like from other systems? I mean, even in Chatterbug, we encourage people in the company to use other language learning systems as well, so that we can see what do you like from that we don't have here that works for you for what you're doing, right? And yeah, it's constantly valuable to, if you can talk to your customers as much as possible.
Yeah, we do 3 hours a week each, myself and Corey and the other founder in support.
Yeah, support's super valuable.
Yeah, you do tickets and you just phone calls, chats, and things like that. Yeah. And I met another company a few years ago in Finland, and that's what we're doing. It was part of the company that each one of the heads of the company, everyone had to do 3 hours a week of support and just answering tickets. It's you don't get, and I think Mercedes actually does that as well. The heads of the production line, they sit in the board's meeting. And when they interviewed like the managing director of Mercedes, they were like, yeah, I mean, it's normal. They know the product much better than we do. Of course, the guy from the production line, I wanted to sit in the board meeting.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things about support is you need to make sure that it's as easy as possible for people to give feedback.
Yes.
Which is not always, right? Like, it's actually a surprisingly sort of interesting task to go on your website or to go on pretty much any website or app and say, if I wanted to report a bug, right? Or if I wanted to report a problem, what is the process to doing that? And a lot of times it's a 23-step process, right? Where you have to dig around and find help and find, send a message and then start categorizing, here's the major problem and here's the secondary thing and here's what my customer ID is and here's, the page I was on when it happened and blah, 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 blah. And then by the time you get to the end, how many people actually get all the way through that and how much information are you missing? Like on our website, it's been really nice because we have this intercom thing, right? And so you can just click on, there's a little icon in the bottom corner of everything. And so everybody that has a problem with somebody, with something on our website, they'll click on it and they'll send us a thing. And it's one text box, right? It's just, here's my problem. And it's fantastic. Mm-hmm. It's the best thing that happened to businesses, I think. That just this super, super easy feedback process. And it's the most important thing on your website, I think, is how do people tell you what they're frustrated with, right? Or what they love sometimes. Like sometimes people will just thank us or something, right? And every time I go to a product that has that, I love it because when I find an issue with most websites, I won't even tell them that I had a problem, right? And in my head, I'm thinking this would be sad if they were on my website and they just they just ran into a problem and gave up. They wanted to use it, then that's the worst outcome, right? But if they get frustrated and they send me something and just say, hey, this doesn't work, then that's great. That's something I can see that if it happens, often, or if it happens to lots of people, and I can fix what it's doing, right? And more, I actually just went through this whole, it's actually kind of funny with Microsoft because, due to the GitHub thing, I'm a Microsoft shareholder, but like I tried to use Azure and I went through this whole thing and I was just complaining about every step of it on Twitter of just being like, I don't even know how to report the problem that I have because it's so complicated to get through all of this, right? And so I was just doing it on Twitter and then they got back to me on Twitter and it's like, well, if it was that easy, like why not just do it that way the first time? Like make it easy for me to say like this is what my problem is. And I feel like everybody wants to make their jobs easier, right? Like streamline their own support process where they really should be trying to get as much input as possible. So that they know what people are running into. And it's really, I feel like it's not optimized enough or most companies don't pay attention to it in the way that they should.
I used to use it with Hotjar when I was running the e-commerce company. You can actually have the feedback. You had the feedback tab. And I was amazed by people using the feedback tab to give me advices on conversion rate optimization on page. And I was like, I couldn't find the button. And it was amazing, like people just helping me out of understanding. You read all these comments. Sometimes they were like, I hate your product. I didn't receive my order, which was, completely useless because, you have to open a ticket. I don't know where you're from, or I need the order number. But I think in commerce, just to give them the feedback, I noticed a lot of people actually helped me out with conversion rates, optimization on page. Like maybe put a button there. I couldn't find this. I couldn't find that. Yeah. And I think it's super important. You're right. You have started as well a accelerator for startups, right? And you're advising now a lot of startups and you're investing as well in a lot of startups. What do you look for in a startup before investing?
So, I mean, we are super early stage. And honestly, I think the reason that we got into it is because, my wife and I run this investment company called Scene, SENE, which is Scott and Anne, Scene.
Smart.
Yeah. And we got into it because I think the main driver is we both love early companies. Like, it's fun and it's interesting and it's people building something new, right, from scratch, have a lot of passion. And we've both been through a lot. And so, we can help mentorship wise if somebody has a question or somebody needs a connection or something like that, like we can help that. But for the most part, we're pretty hands off. We like to invest and then help them when they need something. But I think the reason we got into it is because we love companies. Like, we just love young companies. We think it's really fascinating. It's fascinating to talk to them about what are they going through, what are they seeing, what are their problems. We can offer advice if they want it, but if not, it's just both wanted, I think, to be involved in more companies because we love companies. Like, it's interesting what people do, and so we have this space here, and we have companies here, and it's nice to go through and see all the energy, right, and see all of these companies talking to each other and helping each other out. And so, Scene for us is this labor of love. Like, it's fun. Like, it's energizing. It's interesting. And if we can help, then that's great. But it's also fun to be part of the ride, right? Because we can only run one company at a time. Like, it's not, it's so much just, focus and energy and time even into this one thing. Like, we can't run 10 different things but we find them all interesting and want to be a part of them. And so that's why we got into it. We really don't have a particular focus other than young companies with entrepreneurs that really care about their product, which sometimes you run across pitches where it doesn't seem like they care about their product, right? They found some niche, or they think they can make money in it or whatever, but like, they don't care about what they're doing. And so, what we tend to really want to align with is people who have a real passion for building whatever it is they're building, and that they're in Berlin. Because then we can be around
market fits, right?
Yeah.
Founders market fit more than anything.
100%. Yeah. I mean, our investment companies are all over the place. We have people. We have a company called Here that's in local food. We have a company called Atmo that's in cleaning products. We have a lot of SaaS companies, pure software companies, B2B company. Like, I mean, it's all over the place. And I think if anything, it's more interesting to us because we get insight into industries that we haven't seen before, right? That's not a GitHub or a Chatterbug or whatever. And so I learn more, right? Like, I get to meet people all over the place and have more connections to introduce people to, and I find that interesting.
I love that because I do see a lot of people raising money with no passion in what they're doing, but they are trying to craft the pitch based on hype and based what's hot right now. So it's like, oh, e-commerce is very hot, creator is very hot. Let's create a product that combines e-commerce with creators. And I see these products like, it doesn't make any sense, and then you check their LinkedIn profile and it's like they have no experience in the field. They might have been working in a VC before, so obviously they know what to pitch. Yeah. And it seems to me that sometimes people are just raising money because they're too lazy to find a job. I mean, well, maybe it's a bit shit what I'm saying, but it does feel like that. Instead, there are a lot of people that are passionate about what they're doing and they don't really care about, the money or the profits or anything like that. They just want to build an amazing product. And I do see that those type of founders, 9 out of 10, they raise money. I mean, I hear a lot, especially, talking to the guys of Seedcamp. Seedcamp they do the same. It's like founders market fit. It's very early stage, and I just want to make sure that you are the right person to craft this idea because everyone has good ideas, and at the end of the day, it's about execution, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you so much for, being with us, and it was very much. The wine was lovely, and
cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you so much, you guys, for watching. If you like this video, hit the like button below, share it with your friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and be sure to hit the subscribe button for new videos every single time. Thanks, and I will see you on the next video.